on the line. So if you do have any questions or during the process of going through this presentation, you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function and type in. I am Andrew Delpreet, and I work for Liberty Mutual, and I will be the facilitator for today's webinar. In addition, there's a couple panelists, which I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a couple minutes. But before we get started, I do want to just give a shout out to Siemens for being our sponsor for today's webinar. It's actually a great segue into this Internet of Things, or IoT. Obviously, Siemens being building automation systems. Siemens knows buildings because they've been working with facility managers for over 150 years to install, integrate, and service technologies like the building automation, life safety, security, electrical infrastructure. So this is it's good that they're sponsoring this. Today, Siemens has recognized that facility engineers are tasked with managing overwhelming amounts of data from an increasing number of devices, often connected to disparate systems. Additionally, in the next 10 years, I'm sure people have either read in the news or read in articles or seen on the news, there'll be a shortage in the workforce due to retiring staff whom have decades of expertise. Siemens' answer to this problem is to work with you to understand your unique challenges and develop a digital strategy that combines the right mix of expertise, technologies, and tools to help you and your buildings into a high-performing assets for your business. So IoT's here to help. Go to the next slide. And thanks again for Siemens, the Internet of Things in the workplace. So what I'm going to do next is just give a brief introduction for the panelists. Sorry, perfect. So here we are for Meet the Panelist. I just want to, I'll start off with Bryson, then go to Monic, then Matthew if he's online, and then myself. And realistically, I know the company's already there, but just the company, title, and then how long you've either been working with the Internet of Things or how long you've been working in the industry. So Bryson, we can start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Bryson Spencer. I'm the service sales manager for the Boston branch for Siemens, and been with Siemens for a little over 8 years. And essentially what we do in the automation world is Internet of Things for buildings. So I'm excited to talk to the rest of the panelists here and hear from the folks dialed in.
Great. Thanks, Bryson. Monic?
Thanks, Andrew. My name is Monic Alawalia. I've been in the industry over 20 years. I'm the CEO of Aqueduct Technologies. We're a New England-based solutions integrator. We focus on helping customers successfully deploy IT solutions. And a lot of that focus is around ensuring well-performing, secure, and available networks, applications, and communication systems. With the proliferation of devices coming onto the network being driven by IoT, we've seen huge spikes and an increase of demands for environments to support these devices. And just as importantly, we're seeing environments compromised by their weakest links. And in many cases, those weakest links will be these IoT-oriented devices that are being deployed. So I'm happy to be here today and hopefully educate some of you on our experiences as well as learn from the others on the panel as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's see. Matt, I do not see online currently, and that's fine. And as you know, I'm fortunate to be wearing both hats today, facilitator on behalf of IFMA and also a panelist. My name is Andrew Delpreet, facility manager at Liberty Mutual. Been in the industry about 10 years, and as we see the exponential increase in technology, it gets to the point where the reason we have guys like Monic, Aqueduct Technologies, so IT solutions, and then the integrator, Siemens, building automation systems, is because facility managers and IT departments really need to integrate, no pun intended, with the new systems, with the Internet of Things, because as a facility manager, The building automation system is great, meaning I understand what the building's doing, if a system is going down, if a air handler trips on a freestat. However, the Internet of Things is now taking it to the next level, or let's say peeling back the layer and really understanding where that data, there's tons of data, and the Internet of Things is kind of trying to consolidate that. So I'm looking forward for the next probably 40 minutes to, between myself and the panelists, to help the people on the phone understand the Internet of Things. We want to just go up one slide.
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to review again just the learning objectives. The learning objectives for today is to understand what the Internet of Things is and how it is being incorporated into the workplace. Understand how IoT can help facility management and building operations. Understand the relationship between facility management and IT as it relates to implementing IoT. And then the overview of the investment for IoT and the typical barriers to implementation. So just as a real brief introduction before we hit some of the data, the IoT, a lot of people may have heard, they heard the acronym, they don't know what it means, and looking at the data, which we'll get to, a lot of people are unsure of what it means, but to simply clear the page to hopefully have it make sense, think of the people that are on the line right now. If you're wearing a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, there's facility engineers or managers or IT or people that are energy conscious. Maybe they have the Nest, the operating system to help monitor heating and cooling. So if any of those ring a bell, then you're already kind of dialed in to the Internet of Things. Simply stated, it's all about those connected devices or the points and the data that's derived from those connections. If we go down to the next slide, so we had the white paper. It was IFMA's first white paper that came out. It was October, November timeframe, and it was on the Internet of Things. And we had the panelists that are on today got interviewed, and we also sent out a survey. And here's the IFMA survey results: is how familiar are you with the Internet of Things? And if you're unable to read it, on the top, it's the green, it's not familiar, so it's just under 40%, and then a little under, let's say 45%, so under 50% is somewhat familiar. And then we have a very small percentage, let's say 12, 14%, say they're very familiar. So if you took the somewhat familiar and not familiar, you're looking at probably 80% of the people are kind of unsure on what Internet of Things are. And if we go into the next slide, some of the challenges, if any, do you currently face when it comes to IoT? The top challenge there on the bottom in orange is that I'm not familiar enough with the Internet of Things, followed by the clients just don't get IoT. So I kind of put those hand in hand, and you're looking, it's almost 70% of the people are unfamiliar with it. So I'm hoping today with the panelists, we have a couple questions for them. They'll be able to give you guys a better understanding of the IoT. So I guess I'll start with Bryson with the building automation system in Siemens. I guess from a Siemens perspective, how do you see the Internet of Things being incorporated into the workplace?
Yeah, I think our area of specialty within the building space is really, the Internet of Things, to clarify it, is really just giving a name to connecting sensors to the internet and making that data available for people to use to make, business decisions on what they want to do. And that's really what we've done with building automation for a while, right? If you have an automation system, it's a series of sensors that allow you to gather information on your building and make decisions on when to run equipment or when not to run equipment. What's really changed in the last 2 to 5 years is that facility managers are looking to do a lot more with creating, better spaces for their tenants and things like that. So An example of something that has changed is the ability to basically track who's walking through the space and customize that space for them. So that, if you, for example, go to your office in the morning and you like it to be 72, the facility knows it's you in that room and, can customize that space to be 72 degrees. On the operational side, we've really seen an uptick in the demand for analytics in buildings. So the ability to look at system information and help you identify areas to improve the efficiency of your building or make it more comfortable or more resilient to power blips or things like that. So that's how I characterize, the impact of IoT in the building space for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryson. And then I guess for Monica, I may ask the same question. I know it's on the IT solutions side. Is your company, are you seeing the business with kind of the Internet of Things, how it's being incorporated into the workplace? Does that seem as a current trend or something that you guys have noticed in the last couple of years picking up traction?
Yeah, I think it's been a huge trend. I'd say on a personal level, I think many of us probably have some of these type of gadgets at home and definitely see a benefit of being able to take advantage of them. I think there's been probably two compelling trends that we're finding within the facility space. The first one is, if these devices effectively could give you information about how they're currently operating, it opens up a world of possibilities that some businesses are going to be interested in. Some of it's going to be around efficiency, just being able to optimize from a cost or a use perspective what some of these devices will do. Automation for sure. If you could correlate information from multiple devices and have it specifically then do something, nobody's in the building, lower the temperature, shut the lights off, things along those lines. We're finding a lot of care toward preventative detection. So if you've got devices that are starting to fail, elevators, things along those lines, the ability for you to effectively put them into maintenance before you have a catastrophic failure or a significant impact to the people in the building type of failure. Analytics for sure. I think as things generate data, people would love to be able to analyze them and determine what they can do better with it. And I think Bryson even hit on some of the personalized experiences, really being able to customize lighting, temperature, how hot you want the water, things along those lines, I think are definitely coming into play. I think on the flip side, we're seeing that a lot of the technologies are converging. So wireless is definitely one area that, has been traditionally something that IT has leveraged. We've got a lot of organizations that have gone through refreshes of their lighting systems toward LED. And a lot of the LED lights today do have the ability to provide Wi-Fi and even Bluetooth capabilities built into those fixtures. We're also seeing the rise of new technologies called Li-Fi, which is actually using light to transmit data. And we're seeing that being a potential compelling movement for a lot of organizations over the next 2 to 3 years. So I think there's definitely a huge blurring of the line of what was facilities and now what is providing value from a technology and data perspective.
Great. No, thank you. And then something that you mentioned too on what is facilities, I guess for either of you, is there either during business meetings or a meeting with customers, are you starting to see a trend with, I guess, facility managers or IT, or the combination where facilities is saying, let me reach out to my IT department, or better yet asked is 10 years ago, did you guys see the IT and facilities working as closely together as they've been doing today when we're talking about, I guess, efficiencies or the phones? We don't even have phones anymore. That's all integrated through the computer and headsets where, yes, it's a facility function because we need to provide the power and electricity to the building. However, it's really it's a handshake with IT. So I know there's a lot there, but are you guys starting to see an integration with IT and facility management?
Monica, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I haven't. So I don't want to lead the witness in the questions. I haven't seen a lot of facilities moved into IT or IT moved under facilities from an organizational structure perspective. What I have seen is definitely a shift in the way that IT and facilities work together. So 5-6 years ago, facilities was really the enabler for IT. They handled HVAC, they handled electrical, they handled a lot of the physical cabling and plants that were needed. Over the last couple of years, we've seen some other shifts now. We've seen a lot of organizations looking to get LEED certified and get some of the efficiency ratings for their buildings. IT tends to be the largest consumer of power and cooling. Therefore, they need to work pretty symbiotic together to get to the overall business objectives, if that's the goal for an organization. We are also finding right now that, a lot of the equipment that you may have serviced, your large generators, things along those lines, have usually had a vendor that had some type of remote access to get into there and manage or provide some preventative or reactive care reporting against it. Some of the largest breaches that we've seen that have hit Target and Home Depot originated through a back door of a third-party vendor that effectively was servicing their own equipment, but then were able to use that access to get onto the network. So there's definitely a big concern around what actually gets plugged into the network, both at the IoT and maybe just potentially traditional things that you guys have had that now have an IP heartbeat or the ability to get into them. And IT is taking a big focus right now in ensuring that anything that comes onto the network is protected in some shape or form, so there isn't a backdoor breach kind of caused by it.
And that's great feedback, because that's a perfect segue into the next section. So we understand now that we're getting more familiar with the Internet of Things and how it's technology, which can be very useful. However, for people that have the Verizon, if their router goes down and everything's connected through a Wi-Fi, it seems to be the Nest, the Internet, and everything that we in this day and age utilize is kind of goes by the wayside. I guess, and it's in everything that we do. We haven't heard too much, but from a security, excuse me, you think there's vulnerabilities in the IoT? It's just, again, it's newer technology. We're starting to see hackers. I guess they're doing it for fun. And I guess that's always has been the concern. But once we do fully, whether it's a cloud or all these data points are connected into the Internet of Things, do you guys think there's a security aspect that should be considered?
Yeah, I can start there, and I'm sure, Monica, you have a lot to follow up on this one. From a Siemens standpoint, I think we always have that first question up front. How do you want to handle security? Is it something that you have an organizational structure for? And a lot of large organizations, much like yours, Andrew, you've got some horsepower there around IT, manpower and ways to manage security and some policies in place. But we work in facilities large and small, and we try and offer options from our side that give those smaller facilities an opportunity to still take advantage of connecting things via the internet and the cloud, and not have to worry about security on that end. So but it's definitely, we see a lot of systems connected in ways that should definitely be reevaluated, and it's one of the primary things we work up front to figure out is how are we going to make this solution secure. So
got it. Yeah, kind of I know Monica kind of said the back end through Home Depot. That's kind of the big concern. I shouldn't say concern. It's just you need to be conscious of it and put in countermeasures where if we are using these devices, that could be a door left open, or potentially someone coming in the back door to get onto the network that could create havoc. Let's see. So we do have one of the questions here for the panelists, and it says, question for the panel. It seems that there would need to be a lot of decisions or decision makers involved in this type of implementation. Do you see any common trends in terms of what the typical driving factors are for moving forward with IoT implementations? With the question mark. So guys, if you want, I can get started on that. Great question, and I guess to answer that from a facility management standpoint, you're right. You're going to need some finance, whether it's a capital budget item to try to scope something. However, from a facility management standpoint, we kind of look at things on whether it's a LEED certification. We try to think of predictive analytics, preventive maintenance, and increasing the efficiency. So when we try to, I guess it's telling a story. So for us, what we do, if we know there's something based on if we're getting baseline data and trending certain pieces of equipment, whether it's lighting, off hours, or air handlers that are just using a ton of energy, we'll try to utilize smart technology or new high efficient motors and whatnot. We'll have to scope it, but that's when we tell the story to the finance folks or getting approval or funding to move forward. Oz is telling the story on what the current situation is, why we want to invest the money, and then in return, what those funds will help us do. And usually the answer to that question is it's either more efficient or, again, if with the IoT, we're starting to get there. We have a good building automation system, and we're trying to understand a little bit, dig down a little bit deeper with the Internet of Things. We actually currently interviewed a couple different companies on kind of we have all this data and all these different points, and how do we use that? Because at the end of the day, it is a lot of data. It's a ton of useful data, but it's a lot of data. And facility managers and their staff, it's trying to get the correct dashboard and how to read the data. And it really is, it's unlimited. I went through some demos and I've seen it. And if you're looking for trends, and you can just keep on digging deeper and deeper. And to get back to your question, how much does that cost? That's what my team internally, and engineering manager and senior facility manager, we're having those conversations on how can we present this and make the leadership team and the financial people who would at the end of the day approve it. How do we tell that story to say, hey, it's money well spent? So that's kind of my take on it. I'm not sure if Monica or Bryson, if you have anything to add, or if you need me to repeat the question.
This is Monica here.
Go ahead, Monica.
I think it's kind of interesting. A lot of companies dabble into IoT. I don't feel that there's a overarching, large strategy for the initial project. When we talk to companies, we kind of group IoT into three specific functions. The first thing is the device. So there's devices that we consider passive. They effectively don't do much except give you a very specific piece of data. It could be temperature, could be humidity, something that's a very low cost sensor that gives you some type of data point that is valuable to you for some reason. There's an active device, which is going to be probably running more of a mini computer that will not only be coming up with data, but also analyzing and automating data around it. I think that's what becomes more of the security threat in general, just to the earlier question. And then there's ultimately the data that you have and what you decide to do with it. I think efficiency by far is the driver, that if you had this data available to you and you had the sensors, you could probably find ways to be more efficient, which effectively will save costs or improve productivity in general. And then I think there's definitely some verticals. We've got some companies that manufacture, food, and refrigeration for them is a big deal, and to be able to effectively monitor that and spot failure so there's no spoilage is important. We're seeing a lot in the retail space around theft and surveillance, and being able to tie, costly items back to proximity of where they are within a building and if they've left. Healthcare by far, we've seen a lot of things taking place in healthcare around people monitoring individuals through their bracelets, or potentially even monitoring where devices are in case somebody needs to find them relatively quickly. Utilities have really built into IoT, and we're seeing even things like casinos really leveraging some of the technologies out there to do it. So I think it's going to depend on what vertical you are on, of how fast you accelerate. But I think kind of what you said in the beginning, efficiency is probably where people start, and then you start looking at business process improvement and cost reduction in some areas if possible.
Got it. No, thank you. Bryson, I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
No, that's very well said by, Monica. I think the only thing I would add is that, for folks that are at the point where I think you would describe you are right now, Andrew, is really defining what do you want to get out of your IoT solution, and making sure that, you keep an eye on what you need today, and then, what infrastructure you need to put in place to, achieve your longer term goals. I think one of the main differences between we'll call it facility management and IT, is that the expectation of investments in facility management is to last, 20 to 25 years. And, I think that's something new that we've discovered comes up with IT conversations, is that their equipment and technology turns over every 3 to 5 years typically, and there's a refresh kind of built into that cycle. Whereas, when you invest in a facility, you typically expect that investment to last, 20 to 25 years. So making sure the infrastructure you put in place can handle what you want to do today and over the next, 5 to 15 years is really a critical piece to think through when you're going to make an investment today. So.
Yeah, no, and that's actually great. That's probably great advice for other, I guess, facility managers or IT or whoever's on the phone. What you just said, I think, hits the nail on the head, because that's the most important, where you get the facility managers and the IT and the project team in that room early, not during design and construct, but the feasibility and conceptual, because at the end of the day, we don't want to have the brand new state-of-the-art system, however, have an antiquated backbone or infrastructure, and then the two just aren't really compatible. And I think that's a good point, just especially with the useful life or the asset of IT, where it could be 3 to 5 years, where HVAC building infrastructures usually last much longer. So yeah, thank you for that. We do have a question from Michael, and it says, will occupants have ability to request space heating, cooling, lighting adjustments through their computer or smartphones? Question mark. So that's a good question, and I'm going to answer it in two different ways, from a residential and from a commercial. From a residential standpoint, yes, I think it's great in the end user or the individual, whether it be your family or your daughter or your son or your wife, they can have the application on their phone. So if you're leaving work or they're leaving work, they can log in, they can turn on the outside lights. They have the capability for the Nest if it's on energy saving mode, and let's say it's down at 62 during the day, but they know they'll be home in 45 minutes. They're going to turn that up to, say, 70 degrees. So that's on the residential side. On the commercial side, I smile because we have just under 5,000 employees here in the Boston campus, and we see it a lot, and we don't want to give the employees complete control. And the reason behind that, our staff does a great job with preventive maintenance and air balancing and having the set temperatures and set points. So at any given day, we could get a phone call, let's say on the 10th floor, where an employee calls in and says they're warm. So we'll turn it down a degree, and then 20 minutes later, 2 employees call down, same floor, same space, and now they're cold. And it gets into the balancing act on you're flirting with 1 degree, but you can't make everybody happy. So then it kind of puts facility managers into a little bit of a jam, because I don't want to tell either Michael or Allison, hey, listen, maybe wear a long sleeve shirt instead of a t-shirt and whatnot. So I'm always a little bit hesitant on giving them complete control. However, we do always, from a customer service standpoint, we do take all the requests seriously. However, if we have set points, so for example, if we want to try to maintain a 72 degrees, if it's 73, 71, at the end of the day, we're maintaining temperature, and that's kind of the role and responsibility. So it's a personal preference. However, if it's 60 degrees or if it's 85 degrees, now that's a complete facility issue where there's something wrong with the unit and the way we're distributing air, and that's a different issue. But to answer your question, residential, I think it's great. Commercial, depending on how big the business is. If it's a smaller commercial site, and let's say it's a group of engineers and the outfit's maybe 12, maybe give them that capability through their phones and the computer. There's Bryson or Monic. Do you guys want to tackle that one, or does that relate to you guys with any customers that you deal with?
Yeah, Andrew, I got some customers already doing it. So I think what's interesting is, I think the first question is, you can absolutely do this at home today. And I think what's unique is we heard this term consumerism of IT maybe about 5-6 years ago. And the notion of it was that your users traditionally expected the businesses to have better technology than they had at home. And all of a sudden it flipped when you had Apple and a lot of these other companies giving you really cool capabilities at a relatively fair price point. A lot of people would go home and realize that they felt that their technology at home was better than the business, and they forced a lot of change within the business from an IT perspective. I think from an IoT perspective, we're finding that at home, the thing that most people have probably invested in has been facilities-oriented IoT. And I think we're starting to see that push back into the businesses as well. And I think your users will start asking questions of, why can't I have a different, temperature experience than somebody down the hall? Or I don't like it to be so bright, whatever. They're going to want to have some more personalization capabilities. On the customer side of the house, we have some customers that focus on hospitality, and they've had some initiatives now where, you get a rewards card. So let's say you're Marriott and you happen to have a Marriott guest card. You will pre-program what your expectations are when you check in, what temperature you want the room to be, if you want your blinds open, closed, things along those lines. And you'll also be able to set it to your smartphone once you're linked to the actual room. So we're already seeing some customers leveraging technology for that. Now, it's a little bit easier from a facilities perspective in hospitality because the room typically has its own zone, and you can typically manage a room by itself. If you're in a large facilities, you probably don't have it that localized. But I definitely foresee that this is going to become more and more of an expectation of your end users. And I think the management staff and the executives in a lot of companies are doing this at home already. They're going to start asking facilities why they can't do it in the office.
Sure.
Yeah, it's great information. Good feedback too.
Yeah, I would, add that it is an interesting balance, and it is impacted by different verticals. To Monic's point, in places where you have individuals' own controls like hotels or hospitals, or even some of the trends we see now in places like WeWork, where you can rent out an office environment. You've got the zone control ability there. And in cases like that, I think what we see is there's a lot of innovation happening there faster than, most large companies like ours can keep up with. So the shift that, we've made is basically to provide an open, integration platform so that, if one day you decided you wanted to use one technology software to give your occupants an app to, request heating and cooling changes, that integration between that app and your BMS is something that's got the capabilities to do that, so that you can change that capability at will and still know that the integration happens there. So that's I guess what I would say in those places where that's possible, the kind of way we've tried to look at addressing that. Right. In new construction, it's definitely part of that visioning session that we try and get involved with. If that's something you want to provide to your occupants, then that's something that you want to consider when you're laying out the infrastructure for your heating and cooling system, and say, okay, we want to be able to zone it down to a single room, or a corner of a room, or even a floor, so that you've got the infrastructure in place to provide that mechanical isolation, never mind the technology aspect. So
very good. And then, so actually on that, how do you keep up with the customer demands for better tech and smarter buildings? And I know that's kind of a loaded question, because you think back, again, I keep saying 10 years ago, and you see how much has changed. And one example I could use would be when I was at, say, the Gillette company in South Boston, and it was the World Shaving headquarters signs, and we replaced it to LED. And then it's 3-4 years later, finance will see funding requesting to replace the lights again, and they'll say, "I thought we just did that." And again, it's the technology and the LED, and we're like, "Yeah, well, we're getting a rebate from the utility, and it's a more efficient light." So I guess with that is from the customer demands and the technology, how do you guys really balance the two of them? Meaning, you guys, especially in your industry, there's a broad spectrum of people that you have the early adapters who are jumping in on the new technology, and it's stuff that there's obviously a learning curve even for you guys as the companies develop new technology. So you're trying to understand the new stuff, and then you have the laggards, so to speak, who towards the end, it's the antiquated. They want to make sure this stuff is proven for 15, 20 years before they jump in and invest it. So you kind of have both ends of the spectrum. Is there any insight, or have you guys witnessed that with experience with other customers where it's either new builds that are going around the city or just from other customers that you guys probably think about and you're just waiting for them to invest in better or newer technology?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with that one. Is a lot of times there's, to your example there, Andrew, around leveraging incentives available from the utility, and then we try and work with our customers and understanding what is the reason behind the demand, right? So if you want to upgrade the lights because it's a more efficient operation, then we try and build in opportunities to say, okay, there's a 1-year payback on upgrading these lights. Are there any larger capital projects that may have longer paybacks that we can bundle with the solution and go to the utility with to get other capital upgrades that you might want to do to fit into that? So for example, you might want to bundle a lighting upgrade with an upgrade of equipment for an air handler that's been there for 30 years, and you need to get it replaced, but it's a struggle to get it fit into the capital budget. You bundle the two together and maybe you get a 3-year payback on a project that might have been 5 and if it was pulled out separately, and another 1 if it was done separately. So it's really about balancing the priorities on the facility, both from occupant or tenant demands, but also the needs of the facility itself. When you need to do an upgrade, take advantage of the opportunities to bundle low-hanging fruit with kind of the bigger investments. So,
got it. Thank you. And for the guys and girls that are online too, thank you for the questions. And we have just about under 20 minutes left. If there are any other questions you guys may have, either something that we have spoke about and you want us to either dig into it with more information, or something that we have not spoke about yet that you would like to hear, please let us know. One of the items I did want to just touch base on, and it's kind of difficult to quantify. I had it in as one of the learning objectives, and that was an overview of the investment for IoT and the typical barriers to implementation. And I can't really associate a cost with that because, again, in any project, scope drives cost. And I guess it depends on obviously the scope, which is going to drive the cost. Just something that for the investment side of things from my end on the facility side is that we are looking into, again, different companies that we can utilize the data points behind the building automation system. So we do get into the more predictive analytics, and we're really understanding how the system operates. And again, the problem, or I should say the question for us is, we know it's an investment and we have multiple buildings here. So I guess to quantify that, to hit this learning objective, our approach is to get cost, and we'll try it with one building just to slowly get understanding how it works, instead of some approaches that people may take as I want to jump right in, and it's it's everything. Our approach, again, we have the flexibility where it is a couple different buildings. So we'll try one building to see how that can add value to our business and kind of see the efficiencies. I think from an operational standpoint, it provides great insight because now it's really questioning the status quo or the day-to-day operations. Now, granted, we do have the nighttime set back and we're very efficient and we have schedules in the building automation system. However, we think the Internet of Things and the companies that are out there providing the analytics could be very helpful to take that next step into having us become more efficient. And I know Monica and Bryson, it may be a tough question, but I guess is it worth the investment, or what are you guys seeing with the different customers that you guys have to deal with? Or what barriers do you guys see for implementation if you do have potential customers that want to make the investment, but I guess it's the barriers of implementation. So is it the IT need to get involved? Is it the finance involved? Is it people don't know enough about it and they think it's just the flavor of the month type thing, so they don't want to invest? Have you guys come across anything like that?
Yeah, I guess I would address it as the technology is really a small part of the investment sometimes. It's easy to go out and, not easy, but a lot of people can go out and find a way to, get a one-time investment in technology to do something like an analytics or, spread sensors across the building that will, provide occupancy information. The really interesting conversation starts when you talk about, okay, when you do get this stuff connected, what's the team look like that looks at the information? And, when you identify an action that needs to be taken, what do you do? Who goes and does that? For an example, if you get as identified that there was inefficiencies in a piece of equipment, Andrew, does your facilities team end up with an extra work order that you don't have time to address from some other group? Or, is there a process in place to go out and handle some of those? So that's some of the challenge that we've seen is people have gotten over the hurdle of investing in IoT. They're now starting to see that struggle of, okay, we've got all these dashboards and reports and things like that. What do we do with this information now that we want to improve the operations or something? So, Monica, I don't know if you've got a different perspective on that question there.
Yeah, I would say if your business yields something, meaning it makes something, farming, manufacturing, things along those lines, you can probably find some pretty strong business justification of either reducing downtime, which costs you real money, or potentially improving what your output is. If you're looking at it purely from the facilities perspective, I think it's going to depend. If there's a lot of office relocations going on right now in the greater Boston area, and many of these organizations are moving to more of these innovation hubs or the Seaport District and things along those lines, where they want everything connected and to have a pretty strong interrelated experience for the users with the environment that they're working in. So there's a lot of digital signage, a lot of touch panels. There's a lot of personalization stuff that we're seeing really pick up. And I think it's becoming a little bit of an attractor for people to be able to hire top talent, especially in the technology space and things along those lines. In other cases, we're seeing individuals use IoT to help with safety, public safety. If there's a fire, how do you quickly notify somebody about that? How do you navigate them out of the building? Which sprinklers do you turn on? Which sprinklers do you not turn on? So I think it's going to depend. If you're just looking at it from a facilities perspective and you're talking to a CFO, I think there has probably been a little bit of the soup du jour for them. It could have been solar panels. It could have been cogeneration. There's a lot of things that have been brought to their attention as being the next big thing to help save money. But I think because they're more familiar with some of these technologies in their personal life, it might be a little bit easier to get a couple of quick wins. And a couple of those quick wins are probably just a reduction of electricity costs through lighting and through some HVAC controls, as well as being able to provide some data and analytics. Because at the end of the day, if you can actually show a reduction in carbon footprint or a reduction in cost, and you can quantify that, I'd say take the low-hanging fruit, get one or two quick wins, and then start looking at other ways to expand this type of technology where it's going to provide even greater business relevance but ultimately it's going to cost more. But you've got at least a track record of how this can benefit, that you'll be able to leverage as some of your decision-making criteria into convincing somebody to make some large expenditures.
Got it. No, thank you guys. There's we got one question from Tom Palange, and he has, considering the lack of awareness from the IFMA research, what are some good resources for helping facility managers expand their knowledge about technology and IoT? I can start on that one, guys. I would say that IFMA, they actually did a good job, because reading some of the, whether it's building operation management, facility engineering journal, I started to see a trend, and that trend was the different the blurbs or articles on Internet of Things, and I definitely noticed I started to take a little more of an interest, because I started to see it pop up a lot more frequently. So I wanted to better understand what does this mean? Is it just an acronym? So for me, it's twofold. To answer the question, it's some of the facility management journals or the magazines that come out, to either read up on it, or more importantly, I would say even the IFMA organization, and it doesn't have to be IFMA, it could be other organizations as well, and networking with your peers or colleagues, and just catching up and understanding what's going on in your world. And it's amazing on when you may be talking to, say, a director of engineering at Brigham and Women's, and then you're talking to someone else in manufacturing, and then you're talking to one of your friends who's also in the industry, and they're all starting to say the same thing on where they're headed. For me, that's usually where I start to brush up. If I see, I think it was Wayne Gretzky, he had the good saying of not where the puck's going, but where it's going to go. And I just saw Internet of Things where I couldn't avoid it, meaning I was seeing it in the articles, I was seeing it in the news, and I was seeing it speaking with my colleagues. So I kind of wanted to freshen up a little bit on it. And IFMA jumped on early to offer the first ever, the white paper on it. And then here we are as a follow-up from the white paper, doing the webinar to help our peers and other people within the facility management world and IT, just to better understand the Internet of Things. And to be honest, I think a lot of people do hear the IoT or Internet of Things, and they just don't know what it is, and that may worry them because it's something new. But if you change your perception of that and think of again, I started off with the Fitbit or the Apple Watch and the Nest. If you think of it in that term, you're probably already using it. Especially, I know there's some of the refrigerators now are telling you when your milk's going to go bad, or there's washer and dryers out there now that tell you need to get more detergent. So if you're one of those early adapters to the technology, it's the awareness of just kind of doing it. Do you guys have, I guess, anything to add on that? Did you guys start to see Internet of Things like a trend in the last couple of years, or is it every day of your normal lives, or what are your thoughts?
I would, add that, I think you started off really well there, is that a lot of the trade organizations and industry organizations are starting to talk about how it applies to, each group that you might be going to. So for IFMA, IoT means, one thing for facilities managers, right? And IoT means something different for others. So I would start there and start to engage, your peers and the folks you work with, and start to ask the question of what does it mean for us and how can we take advantage of it? Because the answer comes up with different solutions in a lot of different vertical markets, or different building types, or even different user groups that want to get something different out of it. So
awesome, thank you. And I guess, Monica, I'm not sure if you had anything to add, or
Yeah, I'd say probably three places is where I'd start. One if you just went to Best Buy and happened to just walk through any of their home automation stuff, you'd probably get a really good perspective of the technologies that are out there and how they work. I think number two, YouTube's got some great case studies, 3-minute, 4-minute clips. If you just typed in IoT, building automation, you'd probably find 50 clips of just really cool things that companies have done. And I think number three is, you got guys like Bryce on the phone where these organizations have built end-to-end, solutions really to drive these type of efficiencies. And sometimes, just a whiteboard, open discussion of if this building was being built from the ground up, how do we do it differently? How would technology be incorporated? It kind of gives you what that nirvana look is. And then you can kind of work backwards. You can use it for planning for when you relocate. You can use it as kind of picking off what your higher priorities are and then figuring out what that roadmap is to get there. But those are probably the three areas that I'd start with, because I think that would give you a really good baseline of how these technologies work.
That's great feedback. Love the Best Buy one too. That's funny. And actually thinking about that as well with the YouTube, I have not checked, but I know if people are familiar or have ever heard of TED Talk, sometimes they have some pretty good perspectives on that. And again, I have not checked on the Internet of Things yet, but based on what Monica just said, that's a good point for a good search. Good place to start. So we just have a couple minutes left. If anyone has any questions, please feel free. I just want to ask, for me, the very last question, unless we have anything new, is, and there's no right or wrong answer, and I don't even know what the answer is, but if we had to look into the future, say 20, 25 years, and I know that's a long snapshot because, again, technology develops so fast. Do you think the Internet of Things is going to be the daily work, meaning people don't know any different, and the Internet of Things, it's just a world that we live in where everything's interconnected, and when your alarm clock goes off at 5 o'clock in the morning, the coffee pot's going off at 5:02. So when you get out of your house or get out of bed, the thermostat's already at 70 degrees. You can walk downstairs, have a nice hot cup of coffee. I guess, do you guys have any perspective or want to take a guess if you had to look in the crystal ball on what the future may bring?
Monica will give you the first shot at the magic.
Andrew, I'd say 25 years is a pretty far horizon. I'd be surprised in 25 years that there's even a need for an office. I think the technology will allow you to physically feel and look and interact as if you're with other people and in an office space, probably from your house. The next 5 to 10 years, I do believe everything will be around things generating a vast amount of data that smart things happen with. So I do expect that everything from, lighting, automation, cooling, location, picking a conference room that's closest to you that fits the right amount of people. I think there'll be a lot of video surveillance and a lot of security that's going to be brought in to the environment. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on privacy data. There's going to be a happy medium there. Today, we've got customers that can tell you if their employees are taking their phones to the bathroom and what they're doing in there, right? So I think it's here. I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to grow exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other things that we are seeing is one of the things that is limiting some of the IoT adoption in the U.S. is that there's a lot of places that you'd want to get data, but you physically need to still plug something in so it can be powered up. Mm-hmm. And the way that data is transmitted today is wireless through a lot of these sensors. So if you were to take something that was on a sensor and needed to deliver information via wireless, it probably has a shelf life about a month before the battery effectively wears itself out. What we're finding now is that there is a lot more efficient ways coming out where you can still provide data wirelessly, but at very low power. There's something called LPWA coming out. It's a carrier-based new wireless network that will allow these sensors to be able to exist for 5 years and transmit to very low levels of power and wireless capabilities. We think as that becomes bigger in the next year or two, you will probably find everything connected in some shape or form. You'll probably have more data than you know what to do with. In some cases, it'll be useless data, but nonetheless, I think it'll be there, and I think people should just be prepared for it.
Got it. No, thank you. good information. Bryson, you don't have to answer the question. We're just about out of time unless there's something specific that you wanted to add to it.
I would just add that, automation and prefabrication and robotics is really changing the construction industry, which, is really the world that facilities management plays in, where, if you take, for example, down in the seaport of Boston, there's companies working with robotics and 3D printing to, figure out how to make buildings faster and cheaper and more modular. And, all these devices that we're deploying now and in the existing buildings or new buildings are being installed out in the field. I think we're going to get to a point where, for those people that still do go to offices in the next, 10 or 15 years, they'll be working in spaces that have been prefabricated and built before they even got to the construction site, and IoT will just be part of that package that comes with it. So, it's an exciting, wave coming of innovation that's going to, I think, impact not only construction but facilities management. And the only piece of advice I'd give is that we can't be afraid to learn new skill sets that put you in an advantage as a facility manager to take advantage of some of these technologies and skill up to know what that might mean for facilities management in the next 5 or 10 years. So
great. No, thank you very much. Appreciate it. On behalf of IFMA and the panelists, Bryson, Monic, thank you very much, obviously, for your time and participation today. And thank you, everybody else that joined on the phone call today. Take up some of your lunch. This will be posted. It's been recorded and will be posted on the YouTube. And I think usually someone from the IFMA organization will send that out in case somebody missed it, or if someone had to jump offline and wanted to just wanted to rewatch it. But with that being said, thank you guys and have a good rest of the week.
All right. Thank you.